This is our podcast, We Grow Together by Gerber Finance. Hi, I'm Jen Palmer, CEO of Gerber Finance. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're the leading financing partner for companies experiencing accelerated growth to achieve sustainable profit. Here, we cover everything from partnerships, growth, profit, and culture. Are you ready to grow? Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining our podcast, We Grow Together. Today, we have our very own Karim Habib. Karim is the Managing Director of our Canada division. Karim heads our Toronto office. Karim, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey, Jen, thank you very much for having me.
Well, Karim, I have had the pleasure of knowing you for a few years, but our audience doesn't know you very well. So would you mind just diving into a little bit about your background?
Sure, sounds great. Thanks, Jen. I joined eCapital, the parent company, about 5 years ago. And more recently, I joined Gerber. We moved over. The whole idea behind this was that Gerber was looking at expanding in the Canadian marketplace. And this was given me an opportunity to grow into the Gerber family and see if we can grow the Canadian portfolio. But my background comes from asset-based lending with various financial institutions in Canada, but been with the eCapital Gerber family for 5 years now.
So, Kareem, you have extensive experience in ABL. Was this something that, when you were a little boy, were you dreaming of growing up and being an ABL lender? How'd you get into the industry?
It was almost by default. When I graduated from university, I started off in private banking, which is more wealth management. And from private banking, went into retail banking. From retail banking, went into commercial banking, ran a large commercial center for one of the big banks. And then from commercial banking, moved into asset based lending. So it was more or less a natural progression covering off all the different areas of business banking within the Canadian industry. So it's something that I've done ever since I graduated from school 25 years ago.
And while working in Canada is not something new for you, having an office for Gerber Finance in Canada is new for us. And it's something I'm very excited about. And I know you're excited to lead Gerber through our Canada expansion. Maybe can you just talk about why it is so exciting and the opportunity and our goals?
You know what? That's an excellent question. When you and I started working on transactions a couple of years ago, I always talked about that Canada needs an ABL lender that Gerber provides, the kind of financing that Gerber provides, because the Canadian marketplace is we only have few banks. You only have like about 5 or 6 banks in Canada, which is very different than in the U.S. And all the Canadian banks provide ABL lending, asset-based lending, but all the asset-based lending is for transactions for 10 million and over. So any of the transactions less than 10 million, there's a huge void. And when you and I started talking about this a couple of years ago, we wanted to find a way. How do we fill that void where we can offer the asset-based lending? And now with Gerber's presence in the Canadian marketplace, we're now providing a lot of small and medium-sized businesses with an alternative that otherwise they did not have until more recently. So I see this being a huge opportunity, not only for Gerber, but also for a lot of small and medium-sized Canadian businesses having another alternative which wasn't around a couple years ago.
And solving clients' problems, overcoming obstacles for clients. That's what we specialize in. One example of that is Baby Gourmet. Baby Gourmet is a former client of ours on our website. Baby Gourmet was the largest baby food maker in Canada. And they wanted to stop diluting their ownership interest. They wanted to fund their growth, but without giving up their ownership. And so Gerber stepped in and provided debt funding that helped them grow to the point that they were able to continue to grow to meet their needs and then ultimately have a very successful sale. Now, Kareem, you've been in the business for a very long time. What are some of the challenges that you've seen, and how have you overcome these for your clients? How have you helped them get through challenging situations?
So you know what? Before I answer that part, I'll touch base on Baby Gourmet. Baby Gourmet, I know the company when I was with my previous institution, a big bank, and they came to us on two different occasions. On two different occasions, we had to decline them because they were really not the right fit. The company was just starting up, had great opportunities, but did not have the proven results that what the big banks in Canada were looking for. And Baby Gourmet approached Gerber Finance. Gerber was able to support them, but that's a classic case where it was not big enough for the big banks to service them. And I had that misfortune of having to turn them down because it wasn't fit in the box. And then since Baby Gourmet, there's been a whole bunch of other transactions that we have funded. We've funded transactions in the management services company, in the appliance industry. We're looking at funding a couple more transactions more recently. So we have a diversified background, but the common denominator is that when you talk to any of these companies, all of them were at once upon a time being financed by a bank, but because the company grew too rapidly or because it had some challenges with covenants, and that's typically the challenge in Canada, that all the small and medium sized companies are financed something known as commercial banking or business banking, which is laced with a lot of covenants, typically four, five, six covenants. So if a company is steady growth, it fits in perfectly with the bank. But if the company is a new company and the sales are sharply increasing, that's when the banks basically the covenants don't work for the companies, and that's the ideal customer for Gerber, where they're looking for companies with rapid growth, looking for companies with good solid management, and the banks don't put any value behind that. They're looking at it purely on the balance sheet. While Gerber, we look at it based on management, we look at the growth projections, and we look at the collateral. What is the collateral in this case? Like Baby Gourmet had excellent receivables, a good product. While we look at other companies, same denominator, good management, where we believe in management, we believe in the company's collateral in the receivables inventory, and that's what makes it an ideal customer for us. And that's what the small and medium-sized companies are looking at, going, they feel like they're underserviced until they get to say 50 million, 100 million in revenue. At that point, they feel the banks are providing them the service. But anything under 50 million in sales, the banks are not able to provide the ABL financing. And I think that creates a great opportunity for us and also for the companies to have alternative, as opposed as what we saw with Baby Gourmet. They had a choice of diluting their equity positions and and really not benefiting from the uptick in sales and everything else. And ABL with Gerber provides them with that alternative.
Kareem, despite all of our conversations, I never knew that you looked at Baby Gourmet. I love that. And I love that I'm
Yeah.
finding out just now. That's great. It sounds like a small market.
Yes, it is a small market. Remember, there's only five or six banks. So if you get turned down by one, you probably get turned down by all of them because they all work from the same template. And I think that's what makes it so exciting.
Mm.
And in Canada, the whole marketplace is small and medium sized companies. We don't have as many large corporations. So if we had a deal that was 20, 25 million, all the banks, including some of the American banks in Canada, would be tripping over themselves.
Mm.
But I look at our portfolio, almost every transaction we have basically was referred to us by a bank or the lawyer accountant saying that the banks are not interested. So when I'm out talking to the banks, I'm telling the banks, we're not your competitor, we're complementary to you. Because remember, if we finance the loan, we get to keep the loan, the cash management, the bank accounts, the day to day banking stays with the existing bank. So we're basically just a placeholder until the company is large enough. And at that time, they can migrate into banking with the big banks. But until that time, we become an interim step for them.
So it's great. So the banker gets to keep the cash management on the deal, but also instead of just saying no to the client, gets to say no, but I have a solution for you. So the banker keeps the cash management and says, and I have a solution for the lending side. Seems like a win-win for the banker.
It is, and typically a lot of the commercial bankers in Canada are managed. They're managed based on their portfolio. So if they're generating revenue with no risk because they have no loans, so they're making fees based on day-to-day banking. They're making fees on foreign exchange. They're making fees on letters of credits, and the part which is a risk factor, the loan part of it, which they're not comfortable, will gladly manage that risk for them. And this way, the banks are going, we continue keeping the relationship because if they say no, and the client goes from, say, the Royal Bank to a TD Bank or another bank, now they've lost that whole relationship.
Yeah.
By staying with us, they still have the finger in the pot, they still keep a relationship with the client, and they still make money based on the foreign exchange and other transactions, no, otherwise known as other revenue by these
Mm.
bankers.
So, for the bankers that are listening, any deal that touches your desk that you can't do, think of ABL. It's a solution for your client. But what about for the clients at home who are listening? How do they know if they would fit the ABL box?
I always tell the clients, have a discussion with your bank first. Share with your client, where have you been and where are you planning to be? Because the financials will only tell you the past. But I think the bankers have to understand which direction are you headed? What are the challenges that your company is going to face? Is it going to be liquidity crunch? Is it going to be you rapidly growing? Have you landed on some big contracts and your sales will double next year? Share that information with your bank first, because if the bank's able to provide the service and the loan, then continue that relationship. But for whatever reason, if the bank's not able to provide you with the financing you need, or you have a proposal from them and you want to get a second opinion because you like what you see, but you don't love it. There's some limitations. Your accountant may be concerned about some of the covenants, or you're concerned about it's giving you enough, but it's not really taking you all the way. And I find that getting half the capital is more dangerous than not getting any capital, because you basically could be choking yourself where you're taking some work and turning away some work. So talk to your banker. If they're not able to give you what you need or believe in your story, give us an opportunity to bid for your business, because now you have our proposal to consider, and then compare it with what the banks are offering and see which one makes more sense.
I think that's great advice for both the client and the bankers as well. Now, you definitely joined Gerber during very interesting times, right? You joined during 2021, where we're still feeling the impacts of COVID. Can you speak to us a little bit about how the Canadian market has been impacted by COVID?
The Canadian market has been impacted in the same manner as the market in Europe, in USA, and everywhere else. The biggest difference is that Canada's population is about 35 million. When you look at the states, being 350 million, so the biggest challenge that we face in Canada is that we're importing a lot of products coming from US, from China, and everywhere else. So one of the challenges that we have experienced in Canada and will probably continue experiencing in 2022 and a little bit onwards is a supply chain challenge, because everything gets imported. Our biggest market is the US. So we bring in raw materials, we do whatever it needs to be done here, and then we're selling it back to the US or other parts of the world. So one of the challenges that we have faced is the supply chain. And what I tell customers is deal with your suppliers, have the right facility in place. And we know we're headed towards some challenges in 2022. Plan for it today. Don't wait for 2022 when you have opportunities and you don't have the liquidity. So work with your banker. If your banker is not able to provide you with the liquidity based on what you anticipate what's going to be coming down the road for you, give us an opportunity. Right now is the time to make sure you got a lot of liquidity, because if you have the liquidity and the cash flow and you're able to pay your suppliers promptly, your suppliers will sell to you as opposed to someone else who is asking for 60 or 90-day terms. So liquidity in 2022 will be a key factor. And this is a time when you start planning, because if you wait till 2022, your supplies will be jumping ahead of you and you'll have the opportunity but no product to sell.
I think that's great advice. And one of the things that our clients have been most appreciative of, all of the services that we provide, they're probably most appreciative of the fact that we can provide a line of credit that has both a US capacity and Canadian capacity. So basically, when they have their line of credit with Gerber, they can draw down in US dollars or Canadian dollars. How do you think this affects clients, and how does this help them really navigate the supply chain issues and the various other issues they're facing going into 22?
The benefit of dealing with Gerber is that we are a true cross-border lender. A lot of lenders say they are cross-border lenders, but we are able to do in a true sense where we're able to finance the Canadian operations as a standalone, or we can finance a US operation as a standalone and not having the crisscross guarantees. So basically, what we could do is a company could be in Canada and happy with the Canadian bank, but because the Canadian bank is not able to or not willing to go into the US, because the US company is a new company, a relatively young company, and they're not willing to do the cross border without tying up the Canadian operations, Gerber Finance is able to do either finance a Canadian or the US as a standalone, or finance it across at the parent level where they're providing, as you mentioned, a Canadian facility, a US facility. They can borrow in the dollars they want. So they're not doing the foreign exchange constantly where they're losing their gross margins, but they're able to support two independent facilities or individual facilities. So I think that cross border will allow these companies to truly benefit by growing in a bigger market like in the US and being able to have facilities in dual currency, dual opportunities to provide the benefits that they can provide to their customers and the suppliers.
Kareem, I usually close our podcast with a growth tip of the week, but you have done such an incredible job that I'd like to hand it off to you this week. Do you have any guidance or any advice for our listeners?
Plan ahead. All I could say is if you have a strong management team, plan ahead, plan for 2022 now. Don't wait until the last minute because I think that could create some challenges. And if you can anticipate the challenges you have, and if you can plan now in November, December, before the new year, I think in 2022 you'll be in a better position to deal with any challenge that comes your way because cash is king. And if you have a good credit facility that gives you the liquidity, you're in a better position to succeed next year.
Well, Kareem, I am so excited for next year because I know that together we are going to meet so many new companies and we're going to be able to help so many more businesses grow their company wisely. And I'm really excited to do that with you.
So am I. Thank you.
Thank you, Kareem. I really appreciate you giving us some time here today. And for our listeners, if you have a question or you just want to chat, want to ask us whatever is on your mind, please feel free to contact us at info@gerberfinance.com. We really appreciate you listening. Please remember to subscribe, follow, and rate the podcast. Thank you and happy holidays.
Thank you. All the best, everyone.